Hi, I'm back again, even though nobody saw the last one. Nobody's gonna get to see the last one, not even my mom. I did so bad and my makeup was so awful and I couldn't see because I didn't have my contacts in. I obviously wasn't wearing my glasses, so here I am. I am making this because my mom told me to. It's because she seems to think that I would be good at this. So let's see. I don't know. I'm trying. If it sucks, it's cool too. I talk a lot. And I've realized that usually people don't care. People don't care very much about most of the things that I talk about. So I'm gonna talk to you about it instead. And maybe somebody will be like, oh my god, you're so cool. I'm obsessed with you. I don't know. Some context. Today I'm going to be talking about Taylor Swift and also incels. They seem like two really separate topics, but there is a line between them, and I think discussing how we as a society sort of see Taylor Swift actually is really enriched by a knowledge of incels, how they are created, and how our society radicalizes men. Yeah. My first semester of college, I had a sort of specialization in incels. I found them fascinating, and they were one of the groups that we were able to choose to study for the whole semester. I looked into how they get radicalized, where they get radicalized, how to de-radicalize, and how the government can address that kind of radicalization. You don't have to know all that. I'm just going to talk about the first bit. I'm going to put all my sources in the description because I have a lot of them and I also think they're fascinating. So if you want to be like me, the class doesn't exist anymore, so you can't use, I'm not going to tell you where I go to school, but you can't use it for the class. Also, while I am doing all of that, I'm going to be attempting to do my makeup. In the spirit of the video's topic, I'm gonna try and do a Taylor Swift look. I'm looking on Pinterest. Okay, I am starting off with the Fenty Pro Filter Primer, and also with my opinions on Taylor Swift. I am a Taylor Swift fan, I would say. I wouldn't call myself a Swiftie. I'm not part of any sort of like online fandom or really any discourse about Taylor Swift. I do like her music, I really do. I listen to her very frequently, but I just like to put that out there first. It's important to point out ways that I could be biased for me, just for me. So if that makes anything I say later more clear, then you're welcome. Taylor Swift is not someone who uses a significant platform and influence in the right ways a lot of the time. I think she's pretty much the peak white feminist. I certainly wouldn't look to her as a political or moral icon by any means, and people who have criticisms of that are completely valid. I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think anything that I'm going to talk about today applies to them. If your issue with her is moral or political, not in a conspiracy theory way, then it's totally fine. I get it. She's got so much power to influence a lot of young people, and her choosing to stay silent on things, it's a choice. It says something about her. I'd also like to note the whole carbon emissions thing. Her carbon emissions are crazy and unreasonable. It doesn't make any sense. Not liking her music is totally fine as well. Not part of this discourse either. I famously have no taste. I think Taylor Swift is really good. I know a lot of other people think Taylor Swift is really good. And for the most part, I wouldn't really judge anybody for their taste in music. Let's be fair, I'm really judgy. But I wouldn't equate any of the stuff that I'll talk about today with someone just because they don't like the same music as me. So don't come for me, Kanye fans. Taylor Swift's career began most significantly in the year 2006 with the release of her first album, Taylor Swift, or self-titled, or debut. You can call it what you want. Officially, it was called Taylor Swift. She began her career mostly as a country singer with a bit of pop influence. She did have some crossover. From that point forwards, most of the news we start hearing around her has to do with her relationships. Taylor Swift has notably dated quite a few people. She dated a Kennedy, which I thought was so random, but she did. She also had a few acting roles throughout the beginning of her career, like in my favorite movie ever, not my favorite movie, my favorite movie of this format, Valentine's Day, which she actually starred in with her boyfriend at the time, Taylor Lautner. It was very cute. I recommend Valentine's Day, but I also recommend movies that are just technically not good, but like I like them. Take that as you will. What she's also known for is writing songs about these people who she's dating. People have this impression of her as a bit of a heartbreaker, a serial dater, someone who gets into relationships just to break up with people, just to write songs about them. And that was really the consensus for most of popular media surrounding Taylor Swift up until now, really. That really hasn't changed very much. If you weren't alive, if you weren't experiencing this, that's what it was like. Taylor Swift makes a big shift though in 2014 with the release of her album 1989. This album was by far her most popular and also her most pop. It was entirely a pop album. So people began seeing Taylor Swift as a pop icon. This album had hit after hit after hit. Style, Shake It Off, Blank Space. Like, she kind of ruled 2014 and 15. Definitely ruled the radio. By the time we get into this new career high of hers in 2014, 2015, we've already heard this discourse. Everyone has sort of made their opinions about her dating life, her personal life, very clear. This increased scrutiny led perfectly into her new album 3 years later, Reputation. The promotion around this album was essentially Taylor Swift talking about haters and about becoming a new Taylor. This album was kind of a flop when it came out. Again, like, this is just me personally, what I think. I think a lot of it had to do with what we heard first from the album. Look What You Made Me Do. It's a little corny, it's a little cheesy, it's not very good, and it's certainly not the best we see on this album. Who let her make that decision? Oh, we get it, you have haters, you think everyone hates you, and you want to overcome it. Cool, fine, whatever. Now shut up about it. I've never actually drawn on fake freckles, so pray. What I'm gonna do is go like that, and then try and sort of just pick them up, move them over. A little bit. Try and keep them sort of. I don't really think that worked very well, but that's probably the part of this that I care about the very least. Didn't really work. Moving on. Taylor Swift's Reputation era just increased the scrutiny on her. I don't think it's uncommon for an artist to discuss the fact that they're being scrutinized, and for that alone to be a prompt for more people to scrutinize them. She was still extremely famous. Her album still sold like crazy. She still had her fandom. Nothing really was stopping them at this point. Just a couple years later, in 2018, she released another flop album, really. Now, Lover was created in much different circumstances than Reputation. That album was written when she was in a long-term relationship with actor Joe Alwyn from I don't know what he's done. All I know is he dated Taylor Swift. Let's do him a little bit of justice. He was in Last Letter from My Lover, or From Your Lover. And I really like that movie because it has Callum Turner in it. He plays a villain, not Callum Turner, Joe Alwyn. Maybe we're not really putting some respect on his name. Sorry, Joe, you're on the struggle bus. That aside, Taylor Swift had been dating Joe for a couple of years. I think they met shortly after the release of Reputation or sometime during the promotion of that. By this point, they are in a long-term relationship. They've been together for a while, and Taylor Swift is obviously very lovey-dovey about it. I look super red, but I always look really red, so I kind of always overdo on the blush if I do anything to my skin at all. I feel like I look crazy without a good amount of blush on, because that's just kind of how I naturally look. This Lover era was also very highly scrutinized. Lots of discourse about how she was going downhill. Her music was becoming maybe a little too poppy. And I think some people really were harking back to the days of her dating around some more. Following the, I'm sorry to the Swifties out there, I really am, the flop that was Lover was 2020. I don't want to discuss 2020. We all know what happened. Hate it when shows talk about it. I hate it when movies talk about it. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about it. Everyone was surprised when Taylor Swift dropped an album. Taylor Swift dropped Folklore in 2020. Rather than the more poppy stuff that we had seen from her more recently, or the country stuff that she started with, Folklore was a complete shift. The lyrics of the song seemed to be based on fictional stories rather than Taylor Swift's own life. She began collaborating with Bon Iver, I think that's how you say their name, artists who were completely different. And she got like mass acclaim for this album. The change from form really endeared her to a lot of people, especially people who had been, I wouldn't say upset by the change, but were disappointed by pop Taylor, especially in the years following Reputation and Lover. People saw this as a more serious side to Taylor Swift, more mature side to Taylor Swift, and that discourse that has been going around about her only singing songs about her exes was kind of put to rest a little bit with this album. Later that same year, Taylor Swift drops another album called Evermore. Evermore received most of the same praise that Folklore did. Some people consider it better. Some people consider it worse. I'm gonna take a second to put on my eyeliner because I'm scared of doing it while talking. So, give me a sec. Okay, this is so much thicker than it is in her picture. It'll do. Who cares? Following the releases of Evermore and Folklore, people's respect for Taylor Swift had gone up significantly. She was in a long-term relationship. She stayed out of the public eye for the most part. So I think that did Taylor Swift's reputation with the general public really well. Okay guys, I'm really bad at doing lip things, so pray for me. So when the world opened back up, Taylor Swift released her most recent album, Midnights, in 2022. This release also came with the announcement of the Eras Tour, a tour that is still going on and will go on for forever. It consists of music from each one of Taylor's 10 albums. Okay, we're all done. It was speculated during the very beginning of the tour that she and her longtime boyfriend, Joe Alwyn, had broken up. The reason they broke up is still unknown. Considering that they had been together for 6 years, a lot of Taylor Swift fans were really heartbroken over this. I think this whole parasocial relationship thing is getting out of hand, and we might be getting a little bit too invested in the lives of celebrities. I get it. Someone who seems to make someone you admire happy, I'm sure you're gonna not like them being lost. Towards the end of 2023, speculation begins surrounding Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's relationship. Travis Kelce is a football player. He was always a pretty popular football player even before his relationship with Taylor Swift. And he seems nice. I like him. I like his brother. They seem sweet.
High school girl falls in love with a 109-year-old vampire who still looks like an 18-year-old, and nobody asks questions about that.
And those are my opinions on Travis Kelce. But their relationship actually sparked a lot of misogyny. Because Taylor Swift is so much more famous, despite what a lot of football fans want you to think, she got put in the center stage of Travis Kelce's career. Every time he was at a press conference, anytime he was being interviewed, they would inevitably ask about Taylor. Anytime she was at one of his games, they would film her and put her on the screen more often than they would put the other spouses of players on the screen. Taylor Swift had no control over this. She had no intention for this to happen. Not that I think, at least. And we also see this behavior a lot in situations where it's reversed. Women who are dating famous men, their whole life becomes about dating those men, at least to the public. This kind of relationship isn't unheard of. I have no idea what their relationship is like privately, but publicly, Travis Kelce is getting a lot of attention just because of this relationship, and people have gotten pretty angry over it, mainly men. Football fans began complaining that Taylor Swift was taking up too much time from the football game, that she was a distraction from the game, that she was becoming more important to the NFL than the game itself. They began timing how long she was shown, counting how many times she was shown, and just complaining. If there's one thing a man likes to do, it's complain. Especially about a woman who is so much more famous and influential than they are. This point has nothing to do with people who are upset at her carbon emissions, her politics, her reluctance to speak up on some pretty critical issues, and who just don't like her music. That's not what this is about. This is about a really insane obsession with how much she's being shown during a football game. The issue with this is that she was getting the hate for it as if she was responsible. A woman can never do the right thing. If she didn't show up, people would probably say that she wasn't a good girlfriend. She shows up and people say she's distracting from the game and therefore isn't a good girlfriend. There's nothing a woman can do to satisfy all men. It's never gonna happen. Damned if I do, damned if I don't situation for her. This situation keeps spiraling. People start wishing violence upon Taylor Swift. Not just not wanting her to be on TV, not just saying mean things about her body, whatever. People start wishing violence or SA on her. They become super, super aggressive. And it also comes out that people are creating AI videos of Taylor Swift being assaulted, being essayed. There's a discourse about regulating AI that really has been sparked because of this situation. But I think what we're seeing with this newest era of Taylor Swift hate, I think it's a bigger reflection of the culture we've created around men in the last 3 years, 5 years. And I think a lot of that starts with inceldom. I think with how many men are behaving on social media and how they're influencing young men, teenage boys, even older men, I think Taylor Swift's status as a very, very important, influential person and as a woman has become really threatening to them. This is where I'm going to get into more of the technical incel right-wing manosphere stuff, so be warned. The concept of an incel actually came about because of a woman named Alana. She felt like a late bloomer who had trouble finding romantic relationships, so she created a website for other people like her. This is where the term incel came from and where the very beginnings of that community started. Inceldom has changed a lot in the past 5 years and absolutely in the past 20 years from about when this term was made. Alana has been quoted to say that at the time it was not a group for men hating women. It was not a group for men blaming problems on women, but that it's evolved to that point. Now, incels, as we see them now, are essentially a group of men who cannot find sexual relationships despite trying and despite desiring them. That's why it's an incel, an involuntary celibate, someone who wants to have sex, who wants to have sexual or romantic relationships, but is unable to. When it comes to incels themselves, it seems like the blame is mostly put on women, that there is something fundamentally wrong with women, what they desire, that is what is making them objectively unattractive to women. When it comes to reality, that is not the case. There's a lot of reasons why incels might not be sexually active, but it doesn't have anything to do really truly with something fundamentally wrong with women and their desires. That's just what they claim. Incels are a really diverse group. Just within the incel title, there are gymcels and then incels for a bunch of different races, so white cells, and then other stuff that I don't want to say because it's actually just so racist. But yes, there's different categories for different kinds of incels, depending on who they are and what their goals are. For an example, a gymcel is someone who is an incel, recognizes that they are an incel, still blames women for their celibacy, but also, rather than complaining about the kind of men that women want, they go to the gym, work out in an attempt to become that person. A lot of them realizes that it's not about being that person. Becoming someone who is more conventionally attractive does not solve their problems. And that's where the incel ideology begins to fall apart. There are many different kinds of incels, but I think it's also important that we acknowledge that there are incels who begin this descent due to traditional beauty standards. There are incels who attribute their celibacy to their race or to just ableism. Many people within the incel community are disabled and have attributes that just aren't fitting within a European beauty standard. Now, I think there's absolutely a point to be made about people of color and disabled people having trouble fitting within society's beauty standards, and I think that's an important discussion to be had. But when it comes to incels, they do take it a step further. They attribute these issues to women who also face the same beauty standards, women who also really can feel like they don't fit within them either. Incels fall within a larger category called the manosphere. The manosphere is made up of multiple radical groups centered around men with traditional values. Makeup artists, old married guys, men's rights activists, right-wing activists. The manosphere is large and diverse, and incels are just one little cog in it. Where the manosphere is really held together is in their shared traditional values. Those traditional values tend to center around a 1950s style relationship dynamic between men and women, men being the main breadwinners, making money while women stay at home and do domestic tasks.
I do think that, men should be the leaders and women should be the caregivers and the loving, supporting, and the teachers in some cases.
They also tend to promote a dynamic between men and women where men take ownership of women. Many incels compare women to objects or children as a means to justify this, saying that women are better off being owned or controlled as they aren't able by themselves to make rational or sensible decisions. However, in practice, these traditional values don't make men of the manosphere happy, even when they are put in a position where they are in a traditional marriage, such as the old married guys. They are still not satisfied with their relationships. You'll see this a lot on Instagram and TikTok, but men will desire women who are traditional, but still criticize them for being traditional, a trad wife, if you will. but they'll also be upset that their wife is mooching off of them, that their wife is just a gold digger and not doing any work. None of these men's problems are going to be solved by traditional marriages or traditional relationships in the slightest. That's sort of where we get into the deeper actual part of how incels and other members of the manosphere get created. Radicalization in general tends to start with some sort of loss of purpose. This can mean losing a job, this can mean getting a divorce, loss of someone important in your life. All of these things can lead to feelings of insecurity and loneliness, and that's where radicalization stems from. With incels, we see this especially through insecurity. Other incels are created as a result of a rejection, whether it is a breakup or just a rejection by someone they like in general. These rejections can cause them to look for solace and reassurance from other people online. Many men will turn to Reddit, 4chan, even TikTok and Instagram, YouTube too, and that's where the cycle starts. There's a podcast called The Rabbit Hole that goes further into technology and how the algorithm helps this process, but essentially, men will begin by seeing videos that are pretty typical, talking about how a relationship ending or rejection doesn't end their life, how they are worth more than that. But then these videos begin to spiral. They go from typical to sort of vaguely sexist, talking about how, women are just sluts. They're not worth anything. You're worth so much more. And then it'll get worse and worse and worse. And before they know it, they're listening to incel ideology. Now, at this point, there's a few options. If they see that this kind of behavior is problematic and that they shouldn't be partaking in that kind of content, they might leave. There are some men who agree with the content but don't go any further with it. They just watch these kinds of videos, have these thoughts in their heads, maybe might comment on an Instagram post or two, a woman who they deem to be unworthy of their respect, but they keep it mostly to themselves. And then there are those who begin to become part of the discourse. We see this mainly on 4chan. Reddit has done a lot. They've banned the main incel subreddit, and there are still some that pop up, but for the most part, Reddit has made every effort to get the incels off their platform. Now, this discourse can also have a sort of gradual aspect to it. Since incels are a radical group with a history of violence, radicalization is an important part of getting into that ideology. Again, it starts with that loss of purpose, that insecurity, that loneliness, looking for a community. When they get reassurance from these social media influencers and other people who are in similar situations to them, they begin having this solidarity with them. This solidarity can lead to communications with other people in the comments, other people on Reddit or 4chan, and this is where they get radicalized. People don't really know what an incel is. They might not know what being an incel entails, but the best marketers of incels are incels themselves. Incels are radicalized in what we call horizontal radicalization, meaning that they are radicalized amongst their peers rather than some higher power. Other radical groups like the KKK have some sort of leadership hierarchy, but incels don't. There is a hierarchy of who is the most incel-y incel in regards to like who's done the least with the girl, which I take radicalization very seriously, but I still find that absurd. But yeah, horizontal radicalization. Other men like you lead you into being an incel. It's not a process where there's a recruiter. No, it's a gradual group process. And once one of you becomes an incel, it's only natural for the others to follow along. Because if you meet someone and find a real connection with them, and they say they found a whole nother community of people who are just like you, especially when these men are starting from a place of loneliness and insecurity, where they should be receiving care from their parents, from somebody they know, from mental health services that they're not receiving, they use other incels as sort of a salve as a way to fill that hole. This is the system with a lot of radical groups. With incels especially, it is just a means of finding friends who are willing to reassure you, who are willing to tell you that you are not the problem. Because when your mental health is poor, reassurance is probably the number one thing you could get. These men are being approached and radicalized when they are very vulnerable, and that's what makes radicalization so influential. It happens when people have the very least. I'm going to tell you this right now. If you are a mentally well, stable, have a job, have a good social support system, the chances that you are gonna become a member of a radical group are much, much lower than someone who is in a vulnerable situation, whether they don't have a support system, whether they don't have any mental health care or any sort of stability in their life. They are much more likely to fall into radical groups. Now, that isn't to say that there are no people who are perfectly socially fulfilled and stable and also join these radical groups simply out of hatred, because those people definitely do exist. But a lot of times it's not the ideology that gets you in, it's the people, and it's what the people make you feel. What we've seen recently with inceldom is a massive increase in the people who are following this incel ideology, who are promoting the incel ideology, and who might not even call themselves incels, or might not even be incels. When it comes to being an incel, part of it is fulfilling the name. You must be an involuntary celibate. Men who have had any sort of action, who've had any sort of like sexual activity, don't necessarily fit within the incel category. Obviously, they might fit in somewhere else in the manosphere, but that doesn't mean that they can't promote the same ideology. What we're seeing is a lot of men promoting that same traditional values, traditional relationship propaganda. The same men supporting incels in comment sections when it comes to women. It has become so much more casual than it ever has been. I think we've seen this with a lot of different kinds of prejudice, including racism, homophobia, transphobia. We've seen a lot of just overt prejudice more frequently than we have before. And it's no different when it comes to misogyny. Misogyny has gotten much louder than it has been in recent years. For example, I am going to find an Instagram reel, because I don't have TikTok, just portraying a woman doing something. It doesn't matter what. And I'm going to show you the comment section right here. I guarantee, I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what is getting put up on that screen, but I guarantee a good big chunk of it is just men criticizing the woman for existing. We see this with women who are influencers, like gymfluencers. They aren't lifting enough. Well, I could lift more than that. I'm 14 and 150 pounds, and I can lift 700 million pounds. When it comes to a woman eating, eat more, eat less. You're not attractive to me. The biggest crime in some of these men's minds are being unattractive, which is really ironic when it comes to incels who start their journey because they feel unattractive. They become the person that they hate. Incels go into life with the perception that attractive people are mean, are rude, are lesser than them just because they are attractive. And yet when they find someone unattractive, they take out their own insecurities on them. They take what they've learned from people who find them unattractive and they put it back. But the difference is that they put it back on women, because the people that they think are causing their problems are women. And when women make themselves accessible, incels take that as an opportunity and as permission to criticize and harass women. You might be thinking, what does this have to do with Taylor Swift? I think Taylor Swift's reputation when it comes to men is a perfect reflection of the way that men have been treating women online just in general. Taylor Swift began her career being called a slut, being told she's dating too many people, that she only uses men as a means to get further in her career. And that sucks. That's not a nice thing to say to someone, but it's also fairly typical sexism. Ask any woman. That kind of discourse is not surprising when it comes to a woman with power, influence, fame, money. Any woman with success falls under that kind of scrutiny in a way that a man will never. As Taylor Swift has become more influential, more successful, we've seen the harassment getting worse and worse. Where it was just them calling her a slut, now it's them acting upon those feelings. They are blaming her for the actions of giant institutions. They're blaming her for them being distracted at a football game. And now people have even started to equate her influence on the NFL to a larger liberal agenda. It's kind of ridiculous. It's more than kind of ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Whether she likes it or not, whether we like it or not, she's become a symbol of women. Just women in general. White women especially. Liberal white women the very most. Because that's who she is. And that's who her fans tend to be. Obviously, there's more diversity than that, but for the forward-facing Taylor Swift community are liberal white women, because she's probably one of the most influential, well-known women on the planet. And her role as this representative of women has put her at the very middle of this scrutiny, of this harassment, of this misogyny that we've just seen building and building and building within young men and older men and teenage boys. She's become an excellent case study in how men on the internet see women, because we see her all the time. I'm going to end this by saying that there's a lot of aspects of misogyny that I haven't talked about. Misogynoir, just hatred of women of color, and also a very, very important discussion to have. I think protecting women of color is so important, more important than me defending Taylor Swift. Really, truly, honestly. But I think academically, Taylor Swift is an easier person to study than a lot of us, like, average people. Her life is so public, and it has been so public for my entire life, pretty much. I have gotten to see what she puts out to the world and how the world treats her back for my entire life. I don't think Taylor Swift is the most oppressed woman ever, and that's a fine point to make. But it also doesn't change that some of the stuff happening to her, some of the stuff being said to her, is a good reflection of how other women are being treated as well. There are absolutely women who are treated much worse, women in much worse situations. Taylor Swift, relatively, and just in general, is one of the most privileged people in the history of ever. She's got her whole Swiftie army to defend her. I do not have to. And I'm not even really doing it because it's Taylor Swift. It's just that it's important to me. The study of this kind of stuff is important to me. I'll put all my sources and all the research that I've done in the description. Having someone exist so publicly and put their lives out there for the world to see, I think it is only reasonable to use that to kind of further our understanding of issues that affect women on a wider scale. I think that more individual care for women, again, especially women of color, especially trans women, is important. Discussing how this rise in misogyny works hand in hand along with the rise in racism, overt racism. Let's be very clear, racism has existed this whole time. but overt racism, loud transphobia. I'm just one girl and I'm trying my best, and I mean, all I do at school is talk about these kinds of issues, and there's a reason. I really do enjoy talking about it. Not that it's fun, but I think it's important enough that it not being fun doesn't really matter to me. I've gotten much more serious by the end of this because it's gotten much more serious. Yeah, I hope you guys like this if I post it. If not, Mama, I hope you liked it. If someone else is seeing this, then subscribe and like the video, and maybe I'll make another one. Or maybe I'll get embarrassed and delete this, and maybe I'll never post it or show it to anybody ever, but it's kind of fun. I don't know. I am an essay writer at heart. I really am. So if you just let me talk, I'll have something to talk about. Yeah. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, it's the end of the video, so thank you. Bye.